We all want to feel peace in our lives. Peace in our choices, our beliefs, our relationships, and our environment. I've learned that this desired contentment is often found through holding on to less. When we pare down what we own, what we consume, and what we value, we're left with what's intentional, a personalized curation of what is important and true and useful to us. I'm Shannon Leyko, and you're listening to Paring Down, a podcast aimed at helping you declutter not only your home, but any area of your life that's overwhelming. Here, we're having interesting and honest conversations about the physical and mental clutter that drowns out what truly matters to each of us. And together, we'll learn how to pare it all down, not for the sake of perfection or becoming rigid, rather so we can move through life with less overwhelm and more joy, wisdom, and peace. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Paring Down. Today, I wanted to kind of address something that has been bothering me. It's just been bugging me a little bit, and it's made me really look inward and figure out why it's bugging me. It also has made me want to address something that I think is a common misconception. So we're going to do all that today. We're just going to get in there. We're going to get real, okay? So, as I've mentioned even on the podcast before, when I signed with Cloud 10 Media, I started having advertisements on the podcast, which I've explained is a way that I'm able to keep bringing you information and help you declutter your homes, which I hope that you're enjoying if you are here. And such is life. We all have to, pay bills and survive. And so that takes money. And so in order for something to be a career, you have to be able to make money out of it. And when it comes to podcasting, that money is tied up in advertisements, which is a little tricky when you have a podcast about decluttering, right? So I've mentioned I try and keep any of the host read ads or the ads that you hear me actually talk about, all of those are firsthand experience with those products. And I try and make sure that they're not like cluttery items, I'm not talking about the radio ads. Those are just very separate from the podcast. It's like listening to the radio. But anyway, so I've talked about what that looks like here on the podcast. And now on Instagram as well, I occasionally share things, whether it's the same products that I'm sharing here on the podcast, because I want people to be able to use the codes and the benefits that I have. Like there's right now you can get $300 off of an air purifier for your house. And for someone like me whose husband has allergies and we have dogs, like an air purifier is a really beneficial thing. Or, new sheets for your bed. I mean, that's something that a lot of people end up needing to replace regularly. So it's not adding to clutter in your house. It's just hopefully helping you find products that you feel good about, which are necessities in your house or might help you health-wise, that kind of thing. Obviously, things like HelloFresh and BetterHelp, those aren't really clutter. It's food and therapy. So anywho, I do share about some of this stuff on Instagram as well, along with maybe different cleaning tools or different things that might help you keep a tidier home, because that's what we talk about. So a vacuum here or I don't know, whatever it might be. And so I have these brand deals. And I do feel a sense of awkwardness about it, right? Like, am I encouraging people to buy things that they don't need in the midst of telling people not to buy things they don't need? It's a little ironic. But I also am remembering that just because we declutter our homes doesn't mean that we should never buy anything again, or that we need to demonize possessions as a whole. My encouragement when it comes to the consumption piece of decluttering, right? Like decluttering is getting all the things you don't need out of your house, the things that are excessive out of your house. And then in order to maintain a decluttered space, obviously you have to be careful about what you let back in. That's the consumption side of things. And I am not like a staunch minimalist. I just think we need to be conscious consumers. I think we need to just slow down and be mindful of what we're buying and of our shopping habits and what we already own and all of that stuff. And so we're going to go over that today a little bit. We're going to talk about 5 ways to be a conscious consumer. We're also going to talk about a few reasons why it's not beneficial to take minimalism or decluttering to an extreme. If you are one of those people who really believes that, we're better off living in very, very stark rooms, maybe own one bowl and you shouldn't even have a couch if you're a minimalist. This is probably not the episode for you. And I respect your choices too. I really do. There is a part of me that if I was not married with kids, I think I would live in a studio apartment with nothing. There is a part of me that really likes that idea because I do think that getting extreme can open up a level of understanding and perspective on the world that's unique and life-giving. And so I'm like not judging the staunch minimalists of the world. I am just not one of them right now or probably ever. And so we're going to talk about what are some of the reasons we shouldn't take minimalism to an extreme. And one of the reasons I wanted to talk about this beyond my own kind of internal grappling with what it means to be a quote content creator in the minimalist space, making a career out of this, which means I have to make money off of it, right? And even though that's not my heart and soul behind this, like I started all of this simply because I love to do it. I love talking about decluttering and sharing and helping all of you reap the benefits really of a decluttered life and uncover what truly matters to you and live intentionally. Like all of this comes from a place of passion and genuine interest. But there comes a point where it takes up so much of my time that, I now have all of my children in school, which is not free at their ages. And I have to make money if this is going to be my full-time job. And so anyways, besides all that inner grappling, I did get a DM recently that kind of sparked my worst fears. And I've gotten maybe only like 2 or 3 taking a jab at me for sharing brands on social media as a decluttering person. And this most recent one was when I shared some of my codes to get you guys discounts on Instagram. I'm actually, this is not planned, but if you're watching on video on YouTube, I am wearing a shirt from an ethical and sustainable clothing brand that I personally love called Pact, P-A-C-T. And I have a 15% off code for them, which you can get in the show notes. Hey! But anyways, I just really, really love them. And so I bought their clothing before we partnered for the podcast or Instagram. And so one of the reasons I share about Pact is because I do believe that we will continue buying things as human beings, like even when we live a decluttered life. And in doing so, part of being a conscious consumer is thinking about what are the materials of what I'm wearing and is it sustainably sourced, all of that. And so again, we're going to talk more about this in a minute too, but Pact is a great brand that I really support. And so I figure if you're going to be buying something, I want to help you break out of slow fashion and offer you the chance to get to know brands that are more ethically sound. And so I shared my 15% off code. And this man, ironically, I don't think Pact even makes clothes for men. I might be wrong, but it didn't really affect him. But trolls will be trolls, am I right? And so he DM'd me and was like, what does promoting clothing have anything to do with paring down? And at first, I wasn't sure if his tone was negative. I try and assume the best in people. And so I just responded very nicely, like, hey, that's a great question. And I kind of told him everything I just told you about finding ethical sources and slowing down our shopping and breaking out of fast fashion. And so I want to offer the opportunity for people to learn about these sustainable brands. And his response, it was like I could literally see the like slobber and the panting and the like gray troll face, like with red beady eyes breaking out of my screen as he was like, oh, I must have hit a nerve, didn't I? And I was like, oh, he like wants to get people riled up. Like this is his jam. And I didn't even know what he meant by that because I'm like, maybe just because I responded at all, he thought he hit a nerve. I don't know. But, obviously I immediately blocked him because I don't need that kind of energy in my life. But I did think to myself, you know what? As much as I responded kindly and I have my reasons, I did feel like oh man, well then other people must be thinking that I'm a sellout or that I'm not genuine in what I'm sharing because of this brand situation. And so that's what got me thinking. And that's what made me want to make this episode today, because I do think that it's completely normal to buy things in your life, even if you are living intentionally and living a more pared down life. That does not mean you're never going to buy anything again. So let's start with these kind of reasons that it's unhealthy to take minimalism to an extreme. And this is besides the fact that if you get rid of so much that it's like not functional anymore, that's a problem. I think that's kind of the most obvious. If you take it to the extreme and then you don't have a bed to sleep on, or you don't let your kids sleep in a bed and they have to sleep on the floor, like that's a problem, you know? So even though beds are privileges, yes, it's also, there's a level of like caring for ourselves and the people we're in charge of using possessions, right? Like I'm going to have my kids eat out of a bowl personally. So, this is besides taking it to the extreme that your home isn't functional anymore. So the first one is that extreme minimalism can lead to a fear of owning too much. It's like a true fear of this, and it causes anxiety, and you get obsessive about keeping up with some really rigid rules. And this focus on perfectionism can really lead to feelings of guilt and stress if you fall short of these very high standards you hold for yourself. And what that is a pendulum swing. You know, we go from being bogged down by our stuff to then being bogged down by our minimalist mindset. And the idea of decluttering, well, there's a lot of ideas behind it and the reason that it's a good thing to do. But one of those big things is to decrease your stress, to decrease your anxiety in order to live a calmer, more simplified life and be able to focus on what truly matters. So if you're only focusing on the minimalism, that's not what matters. The point is that the minimalism serves as a tool to point you towards what matters, not to be the center end all be all of what matters to you. Does that make sense? So we don't want the pendulum to swing and to get so anxious and stressed out and caught up in the perfection of a minimalism that we miss out on the greater picture and the whole point of it all to begin with, which is to decrease our stress and to focus on what matters, not to focus on all the stuff or focus on all the lack of stuff. The second reason it's unhealthy to take minimalism to an extreme is the condescension and judgment that can start building in our hearts. So an example would be this person in my DMs, right? Like we start thinking that we are better than others for having less or for pointing out that they have some excess. We start looking at them like there's something wrong with them, you know, and that is a direct contradiction to the spirit of minimalism because it's really about intentional living and freedom from the excess. It's not about imposing your values on others or feeling superior for owning less. It has nothing to do with other people. Nothing. It has everything to do with you being intentional, with you having freedom from the excess. And minimalism really promotes focusing on what truly matters to you. It is extremely subjective, right? Like even the most staunch minimalists, like I think about Fumio Sasaki, he's the author of Goodbye Things, and he's a Japanese author, and he's an extreme minimalist, and he can be because he doesn't have anyone else who lives with him. He doesn't have kids, you know, and when you read his book, sometimes for me, I kind of take it with a grain of salt because I'm like, okay, we live very, very different lives. We have very different needs. But, you know, he even talks about how he has this like foot massager, I want to say is what it was in Goodbye Things, that he keeps. And that's like one of the only kind of like creature comfort excessive items that he owns. I don't have a need or would want a foot massager. You know, so even for the most minimalist person, we have things that are subjective to us, you know, because that's what this is all about. It's only about using and needing and wanting whatever makes sense for you, you know? And so when minimalists judge others for their belongings, they lose sight of the personal nature of the journey. And they turn minimalism into this elitist standard rather than a liberating choice. And true minimalism is really rooted in simplicity. So not perfectionism, just simplicity and acceptance and respect for what truly matters in life. And what truly matters in life certainly isn't being condescending and judging other people. You know what I mean? Like that's completely opposite of what matters in life. What matters is relationships and purpose and generosity. And those things have nothing to do with other people's stuff. You know, by judging other people's stuff, you are making it about the stuff. And that's missing the whole point. The whole point is that it's not about the stuff, you know? Okay, so the first one was that increased anxiety and stress. The second is you can get condescending and judgmental. The third is that it can cause strained relationships. This kind of piggybacks off that second one of the judgmental mindset of really becoming too extreme with your minimalism. But prioritizing minimalism over like the needs or even the thresholds of your loved ones, because we all view things and stuff differently, especially of family members, it can be really damaging to those relationships when they start to feel restricted by your strict rules and your viewpoint as if it's your way or the highway, right? It creates tension if others don't share those same minimalist values. And again, are you judging them for not? Because that's not the spirit here. We can encourage those we live with. We can have these hard conversations. We can lead by example. But when we become so focused on just making our environment exactly how we want it to be, then we forget the nuance of human relationship, which is that we are all different and that our spaces affect us differently. And our attachments and our histories are all so different that we can't possibly view things the exact same. So, in my own life, my house is not nearly as minimal as it would be if I wasn't married or didn't have kids. I kind of mentioned, I think I would live in a studio apartment. When I lived in my studio apartment in New York City at the age of 24, it was wonderful. It was great. It was all I needed. I had a bed. I had a couch. I didn't even have a TV. I had a dresser for my clothes. My kitchen was built into the wall. And I had like these two teeny tiny closets because, of course, it's New York. And I was so happy. That is all I needed. And I would live that way again right now in a teeny tiny studio apartment. My husband is not that way. He has a different background than I do. He has a different history than I do that affects the way he feels attached to stuff. He just has a different personality than I do, and that's why I love him. And, my kids have different needs. And so, yeah, my house, if you walk in, you might be like, oh, this doesn't look like a minimalist house. Well, maybe it would look more like that if I was the only one who lived here, but I'm not. And my relationships are more important to me than minimalism. So I do the best I can with my own things inside of the house. But when it comes to things that affect shared spaces or routines, it's more important to me that I show patience and love, and it's not my way or the highway, or I don't have a sense of elitism or judgmentalism. Is that a word? Judgmentalism? But that I'm not judgmental of my husband and my kids, because then I'm focusing on this stuff. I'm not focusing on what matters. What matters? What matters in life, right? My kids, my husband, our love, my purpose, my generosity, all these things we've talked about, right? Like, it's not the stuff. And so we have to not let minimalism get in the way of minimalism, of like the purpose of minimalism, which is to focus on what matters. Okay. So I hope all of that makes sense. It's a little convoluted. It's a little complicated. And that's life. With any big concept, it's a little bit complicated, but I just don't want you to feel like you can never buy anything again, or that your home has to be this perfect minimalist place at the expense of your anxiety and your stress, of your attitude with condescension, of your relationships. Like, that's missing the point. Okay, and now for a little irony, it's time for your commercial break. There is no word that brings me more joy than the word cozy. It matters to me. I want to be cozy at all times. This is why I loved living in Alaska, because you can just be cozy inside. And so I'm excited to bring to you Cozy Earth. You guys know I am a big believer in sustainable and ethical brands, and this is one that you want to know about. Cozy Earth has the softest, most wonderful and luxurious bed sheets and lounge clothing that you will ever feel on your body. If you're looking for something to gift people this holiday season that is not clutter, then you can gift them Cozy Earth's bamboo sheet set, because everybody needs sheets on their bed, and most people need new sheets. Let's be honest. Most people have not bought sheets recently, and they need them. And this is a practical gift that also feels really luxurious. It's the perfect non-cluttery gift, truly. Also, I don't know a single woman who doesn't want lounge clothes. Like, that will not go to waste. I think we all know that stretchy pants are life. Here are some things to get you excited, okay? Cozy Earth sheets help with temperature regulation, which I need because I can't figure out my own temperature at night most of the time. And so since I've started using Cozy Earth, I'm not like sticking one foot out the bottom and then trying to cover up half of my body, and then like in the middle of the night needing to switch and like put half of my other body out. Like, I can't get comfortable with my temperature. And so Cozy Earth sheets, they're super breathable. And so you will sleep without getting so like hot, nasty, and sweaty, It also has enhanced fabric. So it's this durable weave fabric that doesn't pill, guaranteed for 10 years. for a decade. Talk about a sustainable, long, conscious consumption choice. And Cozy Earth bedding and bath products have a 10-year warranty because they believe in the commitment to quality. So visit cozyearth.com/pairing. I'll always remind you there's no I in pair, so PARING, and use my exclusive 40% off code pairing to give the gift of luxury this holiday season to someone you love, and that person you love might even be yourself. Also, if you get a post-purchase survey, then say that you heard about Cozy Earth from this podcast and help your girl out, okay? Alrighty, you guys, have fun wrapping the ones you love in luxury with Cozy Earth using my 40% off code pairing at cozyearth.com/pairing. This episode is sponsored by BetterHelp. This month is all about gratitude, and I just want to take a second here to personally thank my husband for all that he does. I know that's a little cheesy, but it's important to me to let you guys know that this podcast would not exist and I would not be well if it wasn't for my husband, the amount that he steps up as my partner, as a parent, and he also makes sourdough products from scratch. So that doesn't hurt. And I just love him so much. So for this little gratitude shout out, I want to say shout out to Shannon Leyko, my wonderful husband. And along with our loved ones, there's another person that we usually don't get to thank enough, and that is ourselves. Okay. So here's a reminder to not only thank people in your life who you love, but also to thank yourself for doing the best that you can. It's not easy. And one of the best ways that we can thank ourselves is to prioritize our mental health by seeking out professional help. A therapist can help us learn these really positive coping skills and how to set boundaries and really empower us to be the best version of ourselves and to feel better about ourselves. It's not just for people who've experienced major trauma, though, of course, please, therapy is wonderful for that as well. But therapy is for all of us. So if you have been thinking about wanting to try it, but you don't really know where to start, I really encourage you to give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online. It's designed to be really convenient and flexible, suited to your schedule, and really tailored to your needs. You will get matched with a licensed therapist, but you can switch therapists at any time for no additional charge to make sure that you're getting the most out of your experience. So let that gratitude flow with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/pairing today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/pairing, PARING. There's no I in pair. So that's betterhelp.com/pairing for 10% off your first month. Let's talk about 5 ways we can be a conscious consumer. So yes, we might bring things into our home again because we're not taking minimalism to an extreme. However, if we are taking this seriously, if we don't want our houses to be full of clutter or for the clutter to come back, if we want to reevaluate our relationship with stuff so that it is not a mask for insecurity, that we are not prioritizing stuff above people, that we are not letting it get in the way of our purpose, right? If we want to do that, that does mean we have to be much more conscious about what we're buying and about how we consume in a world, especially in the United States or Western countries, that is very much intertwined with consumerism. So what is a conscious consumer? I think a lot of people think it's just somebody who's like extremely environmentally minded, right? Like I think people think of tree huggers in the 70s. And for the record, there's nothing wrong with extreme environmentalists. Thank you for your service. But let's talk about what a conscious consumer is on a more relatable level. So a conscious consumer is someone who makes intentional purchasing decisions based on awareness, which means, of course, you have to put in some effort to be aware of the social and environmental and ethical impacts of our choices. So a conscious consumer will consider factors like sustainability, and that's a big word. I have an episode of the podcast. I cannot remember what episode number it is, but I'll put it in the show notes with a guest who comes on and talks about what sustainability actually is and how to make it less complicated. But sustainability is not just using textiles that can be recycled or aren't going to end up in a landfill forever and ever or get burned and emit harmful gases into the environment and into our planet. Like there's more to sustainability than the environmental piece. It's sustainable if a company is using practices that benefits human welfare, because the human population needs to continue to thrive. And if we don't adjust and change and make better practices in order to better the lives of the humans working there, then that's an unsustainable model for a company. So you got to think about that, fair labor practices, the carbon footprint, those are the things I just mentioned, and the product's longevity, of course. So these are the factors you consider before buying if you're a conscious consumer. The goal of conscious consumers is to reduce waste, to avoid impulse buying, and to support companies that align with their values. So there is a fair amount of subjectivity that comes with conscious consumerism because our values might all look a little bit different in terms of what's the most important thing we want to support with our money and with the products that we're buying. The goal really is to minimize harm. A conscious consumer wants to minimize harm to themselves through our mental health, to others and their mental health and their physical well-being. They want to minimize harm to their homes by not bringing in so much that it bogs us down, as well as minimizing harm to the planet and society, while also minimizing harm while maximizing the positive impact of their consumption choice, meaning that they're maximizing it to be something that they will truly love and enjoy when they buy it, right? That it's something that they will really, really appreciate for a long time. So we're minimizing the problems with how it's made and how we're getting our hands on it, as well as maximizing its use in our lives so that we don't have to go out and buy more and more and more because it's cheap and it falls apart, or we just bought it on impulse and then we never actually use it, right? So the idea is that we're maximizing the positive impact of our consumption choice for the long haul. Okay, so now that we've talked about the big picture of what is a conscious consumer, here are 5 ways to become one. So first of all is you're going to check that impulse. You're going to slow down, pause. A really great rule to follow is to come back in 24 hours. So the 24-hour rule is a lot easier for something you're tempted to buy that you see online, right? You can put it in your save for later cart. You can take a picture of it, like screenshot it, and come back to it on your phone. I even have an album myself that I screenshot something that I think I want. I put it, and then I go into my photos, and then I take the 2 seconds to put it in the album. It's called Things I Want. And I put it in there. So then I know that if I want to come back and get it, I can. And so I might go look at that album 24 hours later. And most of the time I'm like, nope, I was just getting carried away by that impulse or by that dopamine hit that, I think I mentioned on the podcast a few episodes ago that scientists call dopamine the anticipation molecule because we get excited in this anticipation of something. And that's what causes us to make impulse purchases. So another thing you can do, though, is that if it's not an online purchase, you see something in a store and you want to slow down, but you're like, I don't want to have to come back to the store, is take a picture of the item in the store. You can put it in that same album I talked about on your phone, and you can order it later if you still want. Usually stores can ship, or you can find the exact same thing on Amazon or Etsy. It's usually pretty easy to find something online and buy it that way. Another strategy, of course, is to make a shopping list before you go to a store and just stick to that. Like, don't get distracted. Easier said than done, but making a list is helpful. And another way to check your impulse is to be deeply rooted in your why. So if you know why you want to be a conscious consumer, if you know why you want to live a decluttered life, it makes it a lot easier to check your impulse, to be like, I'm just feeling impulsive, but I know that the bigger picture here is that I don't want this item. If you're not even sure like how to develop your why, if that sounds like really woo-woo or like really like a big concept to you, I do have a free Know Your Why worksheet, which is, again, it's in the show notes linked. You can find it in my Instagram profile under freebies. Just look for the free Know Your Why worksheet. And in it, I help you figure out how to identify what your core values are and then relate that back to conscious consumption and decluttering. So if you want to check that out, it's free. It's your Know Your Why worksheet. Okay, so first way to be a conscious consumer, check your impulse. The second, consider what you already own. We have to really do an inventory of what we already have, which is why it is really hard to be a conscious consumer if we have not decluttered our home, because we don't know what we own when we have too much, right? So you have to be able to ask yourself, do I already have something similar? Or if you don't, ask yourself, do I really need this? Especially, I think, like when it comes to women's clothing and that kind of thing. Like, I still love sweaters. I've said that before. I'll say it again. Sweaters are my weakness when it comes to clothing. And I might not have a sweater that is a specific color or a specific design that I think is super cute that I see online. But I have to go back and remember, and I can visually see my closet in my head. And I'm like, I really don't need another sweater. I just don't. It's not worth the money. It's not worth the space. And I know I love all my sweaters because I don't want to have to go in and get rid of a sweater to replace it with this one. Like, I have curated my sweater collection and I love them, and I'm just going to roll with that, you know? So you have to consider what you own and you have to know what you own. Another question to ask along these lines is, what is something you own that's in the same category that you never use, but you were like really excited to buy it at the time? You know, I can think of maybe like kitchen appliances come to mind here. Like if you're tempted by a new blender, like what's another kitchen appliance that sounded really cool to me? Like, oh, I really wanted this, I don't know, salad spinner. And I literally never use it. I just use a fork to stir my salad. Because I never want to get out the spinner or wash it, right? Like, so is that even what a salad spinner does, or does that just clean the stuff? Clearly, I don't know. I don't own a salad spinner, so I don't think I'm using that correctly. But you know what I mean? Like, just think about like, what is something that's a similar category that you were excited to buy and you don't anymore, and that can often get you to maybe not purchase something in that same category again and be like, you know what, my life is okay without this. I don't actually need this to get by, and I probably won't end up using it anyway because I'm cool with the way things are right now. Okay, so check your impulse, consider what you already own. And now number 3 is question your motives. This will go back to your why if you do that know your why worksheet. But you have to be able to say to yourself, am I interested in buying this because it's a trend and because I compare myself to people who are more trendy than me, or I find a false sense of belonging by being on trend? Therefore, that's why looks so cute to me and this is why I want to buy it, right? Or is this a true desire of mine? Does this really reflect things that I like? Does this reflect a style that I will like no matter what changes when it comes to trends? Is this just something I want because everybody else has it, and so it seems like I should get one too? Everyone's talking about it, but my life is fine without it. You know, I think about the Stanley Cup. I'm pretty sure all of us were hydrated and alive before the Stanley Cup ever came into existence. Why did we think that we needed a Stanley in order to stay hydrated? You know what I mean? Like, that wasn't the point of the Stanley. Okay, I'm not saying you shouldn't like your Stanley if you like your Stanley Cup. I'm just saying that, like, we have to be able to evaluate, am I buying something because it's actually going to benefit my life or I need it, or it's a true desire of mine, or I truly like it, or am I just doing it because everyone else is doing it and it's a trend, or I'm trying to belong even on some subconscious level? You know, and generally as Westerners, if you're a Westerner listening to this, most of you are, we have a strong habit of confusing our needs with our wants, right? That starts to get really, really muddled. So it's an important question to ask yourself is when you're about to buy something or put it in your cart, say, am I doing this because it aligns with my values and because it's something I actually need, or I know I will use, or is going to benefit my life? Or am I just doing this because I think I need it, but I'm getting that confused with a want? This is just like a little extra dose of convenience that I don't need to, it's not worth it for it to take up the space, or it's really not going to benefit me that much in the long run, right? Like, I think about the grape cutters and I really don't understand it. Like, this is just for me. Again, if you use your grape cutter and love it, that's great. But like, I looked at it online and it looks cool the way that you like put the grape into the little thing and then you use your thumb to like squish it out the bottom and it gets cut in half. But to me, I can't see how that takes less time than grabbing a grape and cutting it in half with a knife. Either way, you grab the grape and then you cut it. And that's the same movement and it takes the same amount of time. I don't understand. So you know what I mean? So you have to really consider, like, is this just like a cool trick or a cool thing that people are into, or is it like actually going to benefit my life on a like practical level? Okay, moving on. So the next thing you can do is research brands. Research. We don't want to research these days. A lot of us don't. We just want to buy it because it's in front of us, or we want someone else to tell us that they've researched it and they've done the legwork or whatever. And I do know some people love to research stuff, but usually we're kind of just researching the high-end gadgets that maybe we're spending a ton of money on. But I'm talking about researching the little things. If you consider buying a shirt a little thing, or, buying a blanket or whatever you're buying, we need to research the brand if we're going to be a conscious consumer. First of all, that forces us to slow down, right? It forces us to check our impulse, because if you're not buying something, if you have to stop and research where it's coming from, then that means you do have to take a second to breathe, and that can decrease the impulse. So go to their website. Read a little bit about their About Us statement on their website. You can Google basically any brand to see if they prioritize fair labor practices, or to find out what materials they use in their products. And then another form of research that I think we're all more familiar with is to look at reviews. Is this high quality? Will this last a long time, right? Slow down, be a conscious consumer by being intentional. And being intentional means you're doing your research before you buy it, even if it's not some like massively expensive item. And the last thing to do to be a conscious consumer is to consider your budget. Okay. Is there something else that you would rather save your money for, right? Like set these financial goals to make you want to save money for the things that matter to you. And so it makes it easier to not buy things you don't need, because you're like, nope, I can't wait to go on this trip, or I really, really want this, whatever. And so that can help you be more intentional about what you're buying. I also want to remind you that considering your budget also means considering your budget for generosity. I never want to lose that piece where minimalism or decluttering or conscious consumption becomes all about me, me, me. Like, oh, I want my house to be the least stressful, and I want to have the most money to spend on things that I want to spend it on. All of that is good and true. But are we thinking about, hey, do I have the time, energy, space, and money to serve other people? I've talked about generosity before on the podcast, but it has been proven to benefit your life as well. So there is a selfish component to being generous, but also it obviously is a better way to show up in the world and helps those around us. And it is a sustainable way of moving forward as the human race, is to be generous and help the mental health of the world around us by being connected to one another instead of just focusing on individualism all the time. And so you can ask yourself, when it comes to considering your budget, like, would I rather use this money for generosity? Do I have any excess money to be able to offer to those who are in need, or to do something nice for other people? What aligns best with your values when it comes to where you're spending your money? And that can help guide you to be intentional about not spending it on things that you don't need. So listen, at the end of the day, we don't want to be so restrictive with our minimalism and with our consumption that it has those negative effects that we talked about at the beginning of this episode. And we want to shop according to our needs and our values as a conscious consumer. But that doesn't mean that we never buy anything again. It just means that we're going about life with a little bit more intent. I'm going to say that over and over again. I know I've repeated some of these words a lot this episode, but I just want to hammer that home. The big picture, the purpose of decluttering and minimalism is to just be intentional and to have space and room to focus on what matters. It is not a competition. It is not about the stuff or the lack of stuff. It is about everything other than the stuff, and the way that we can focus on those things by removing the stuff. Okay. So thanks for being here today. Speaking of money, next week, I'm having someone on the podcast that I am a super fan of. It's Jen from the Frugal Friends podcast. And I listen to their podcast religiously, and they're like a really big deal. They have a big book coming out in January, and I had the privilege to get to interview her. It felt very cool for me. Their book is called How to Buy What You Love Without Going Broke. Isn't that great? So we really will be focusing on the consumption side of decluttering next week, and I think you're going to love it. So I will see you then. You just listened to an episode of Paring Down with me, Shannon Leyko. If you enjoyed the show, it would mean the world if you can leave a review wherever you listen and share this episode with a friend. Those reviews really are what keeps a podcast on its feet for the long haul, and I will read every single one with a huge smile on my face. So thank you ahead of time. If you're watching on YouTube, don't forget to hit subscribe. Also, be sure to follow along on Instagram at paring_down, where I offer lots of tips and inspiration for paring down, along with what's new here on the podcast. Till next time.